Thank you. My name is Jeroen van Beek. This is a summary of my professional history. Not that important right now. This is Taylor Swift. She was recently in the news, linked to an IT security incident. What happened? Someone knows? No one? There's a hint on the screen. Yeah. Taylor Swift's ticketing is handled by Ticketmaster. Ticketmaster is a huge company. Ticketmaster uses a number of IT providers. One of them is Snowflake, and Snowflake got hacked. There are some reports out there covering the incident response from Mandiant, and there are a couple of interesting findings. One of them is that there was no mandatory multi-factor authentication for administrators. And at least about 80% of the accounts leveraged by the attackers were already known and were already exposed before the breach. So it's a classic example of credential stuffing and not taking even basic measures. And as a result of that, with a username and a password, you could breach the account data of over 500 million of people. So this is a really huge leak. It's not only Ticketmaster, there are over 100 other companies affected, but probably the threat actors will continue exploiting those in the coming couple of weeks or months. Another one, Uber. There are a lot of incidents with Uber involved. This one is about a settlement for $148 million, and it was IT security related as well. Anyone? What happened? No one? Uber uses GitHub for source code storage. Again, there was no mandatory multi-factor authentication, in this case for their developers. And the developer reused their passwords. So they used the password for other services as well. And one of those other services, or at least one of those other services, got hacked as well. The password of the developer was cracked. The threat actor figured out that it also worked on Uber's GitHub and got access to their Uber GitHub and looked into the source code. One of the things he or she found were storage credentials from AWS S3 bucket. And with that, they could recover almost 60 million Uber user account details and 600,000 driver data files. Bonus, Uber did not report this and paid the hackers $100,000 to keep quiet. Again, classic example of credential stuffing. You only need a username and a password, and the impact is enormous. So you might ask yourself, are account takeovers the new 0 days? If I look back in my experience as over 20 years professional pen tester, it all started mainly with exploiting operating system issues, so the Windows and the Solaris flaws. Later on, there were software flaws, backup agents, databases, those type of things, followed by application code flaws like SQL injection. But nowadays, if the basics are covered by a company, typically, in my experience, the easiest way in is account takeover. I'm not the only one saying this. For example, Verizon publishes an interesting report on a yearly basis, and they say credential abuse is the big thing to focus on. One of the reasons, I think they say this, is that we see a trend, and the trend is that there's a huge increase in the amount of available breach data, and there's a huge decrease in the cost and the complexity for an attacker. So a smart teenager can do this and can do this successfully. So what do cyber criminals do? And the most important part, the input. So they got breach data from websites and from hacked computers. And on the other end, we got the output, and that's money. So with extortion or ransomware or stealing money directly, the criminals will get your money. Well, what do we do at Scattered Secrets? We provide some services in two categories. One is we provide companies with the breached credentials of their company, of the domains that the company owns. And the other ones is we add an extra password control. Probably we all know those controls. So you check for a password that's 8 long, 10 long. and some complexity is applied to the passwords, uppercase, lowercase, letters, numbers, etc. We provide an additional check, and that is the password reused. And if it is reused, you should not use it. Well, if you want to run a service like that, you need a large quality data set, and the question might be how to get it. Well, first of all, you need raw data, a lot of raw data. That might sound difficult, but actually it's really, really easy. Perhaps some people are familiar with this website, Breach Forums. There are a couple of them, or actually quite a lot of them. It's not dark web, it's not expensive. You can download a lot of data. This is sorted by the number of accounts. You see 800 million accounts. You can download it in most cases for free. If you're in a hurry, if you pay 1 or 2 euros per data set, you're good. So it's really cheap and really easy to get a lot of data. Nowadays, the more interesting channels are file sharing services and Telegram, especially the Telegram channels. There's a lot of data over there. If you got the raw data, you need to extract credentials. So in our case, we extract the emails and the password hashes. And if you did that, you're at step 3. That's the most interesting one. You can do some analysis and cracking, actually enriching the data and getting valuable information out of the raw data. But what kind of data will you see if you collect and extract data from data breaches? First of all, started in the early 60s, we had plain passwords on the first time sharing machines. We understand now that that's not a good idea, because if someone breaches your password file, all passwords are breached instantly. But plain storage is still used nowadays. So I think on average, we still see 1 or 2 raw files containing plain password storage. Don't ask me why, but it's still used. There are a couple of simple fixes, or not fixes. One was obfuscation. Second one was the introduction of Descript back in 1974, which improved the situation. Other types of hashes you see are basic hashes. So, for example, the MD and SHA family, MD4, MD5, SHA1, SHA2. They were introduced in the early 90s, but there are some issues. One of the issues is that the same password will result in the same hash. So you can create a big lookup table. So if you can get your hands on a hash, you can just look up what the password is. And the second thing is dedicated password cracking was introduced. And it sounds pretty normal now, but at some point in time there were no dedicated password crackers. Familiar ones for some people are Crack and Jack, 9193. One that's probably still very familiar for most people is John the Ripper, introduced in 1996 and still actively supported nowadays. Well, what was the fix? The fix was salting, so you're not storing the hash, but you're storing the salt and salted hash. And the result is, if you got, for example, 1,000 times more hashes, it takes 1,000 times more computing power to achieve the same result. So that may sound good. But it's not that good. Again, some issues. It introduces herd immunity only. So if you got 1,000 or 10,000 or 1 million accounts, it works. But it doesn't help against targeted attacks. So if you want to crack a single salted account, it's just as fast as it previously was. So it's good for protecting your whole population, but it's not that good for protecting 1 or 2 admin accounts. Then we got Moore's Law. Moore's Law, there are different interpretations, but in this case, I mean that back in the days, the CPU power doubled about every 2 years, because we were cracking on CPUs back in the days. And the algorithms are unchanged. So after 2 years, twice as much computing power. After 4 years, 4 times as much computing power. But the algorithms are unchanged. So the security level of the algorithm goes down over time. So it becomes easier to crack passwords. Again, there was a fix, in this case key stretching, that's what they call it. And what it basically means is that you run multiple rounds of an algorithm. The most well-known one, still used today in some cases, is MD5 crypt. Might sound familiar to at least some of you, introduced in 1994. And what they do, they just run 1,000 MD5s, which is about 1,000 times slower. Later versions include SHA family of crypt. So we got we see SHA 512 crypt a lot in operating system security, etc. This worked pretty well for a long time. But again, there were some new issues introduced, especially the general purpose programming platforms for general processing units, for GPUs, video cards. So the video cards were out there already for a long time, but with the introduction of the platforms with CLI code, it was you were able to unleash the power, the raw computing power of a GPU. That meant back in the days that the speed up was about 50 to 100 times for most algorithms. So that's a lot, like 2 orders of magnitude if you're lucky. Then Moore's law, of course, still works and also works for GPUs. So we got the same issue all over again. The algorithms are unchanged. So it becomes easier to crack passwords that are protected with key stretching over time. A new fix, and actually the first really good fix, we saw that in 1999 with the introduction of Beek. And unlike the previous algorithms that are general purpose hashing algorithms, Beek is the first well-known password hashing algorithm. So it's designed with a couple of design criteria. One is to be configurable, so you can configure the number of iterations. And another very important one is that there are some hardware limitations built in, so it's slow on specific hardware. Back in the days, 25 years ago, GPUs were not a thing for password cracking. But even today, in 2024, Beek is a really crappy algorithm to crack on your GPU, because it takes more memory than is available, fast memory, on your GPU. So with a very good design, it's still GPU resistant 25 years later. So this was a very, very big step back in the days. And Beek, obviously, if you're a developer, is still a well-known algorithm and is used a lot. Again, history repeated itself. New technology was used for password cracking, in this case FPGAs. So there's a limitation for cracking, for example, Beek, but you can overcome the limitation to make a hardware device that's specifically tailored for cracking, in this case Beek hashes. Support is pretty new. It was introduced in John the Ripper in 2019 for a very specific type of FPGA and for a limited number of algorithms. When it was introduced, the speed up was again 50 to 100 times based on the hardware you were using. So that's again a lot. Furthermore, Moore's law is still working for this technology and for earlier technology. And especially for GPUs, this is pretty interesting because cracking speed for GPUs is now low, for example, for Beek, or relatively low. But we're at the point that the tech will overcome the hardware limitations. So somewhere in the near future, probably the hardware limitations will not work for the latest generation of GPUs, and you can crack at full speed. The latest current fix, is the introduction of fully configurable algorithms, Scrypt and Argon 2. If you're a developer, that's one of the two you want to use. And besides the configurable number of iterations, there's also configurable resource usage. So let's say a new attack platform pops up tomorrow with specific characteristics. You change the parameters of your Scrypt or Argon 2 algorithm to be just a little bit more, drastically slowing down the cracking power of the new platform. So this is good, and this will probably be there for the next couple of decades at least. Besides that, you need effective and efficient cracking. Password cracking is an exponential problem. And to give you an idea about what it looks like, if you want to brute force 10 million hashes, and you got basic hashes like MD5 or SHA-1, SHA-2, you can crack about brute force 8 to 9 length. So that's pretty good. Probably you will find most or at least a lot of passwords. If it's salted, so still old stuff, but salted for 10 million hashes, you can only crack a brute force length of 5, which is not a lot. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you try to crack it brute force, you won't find it. If it's key stretch as well, you can only brute force 3 to 4. And if it's a good algorithm, so bcrypt or later, then it's 1 to 2. So that means that's about 100 to 10,000 passwords. So if you want to try the password top 100, it will take you months or years. So it's pretty good protection if you want to attack the herd. You might think, well, I buy some extra computing power and I'm good. Well, that's not the way it works for an exponential problem. If you want n extra length, you need 100 times to the power of n more computing power. So if you want to increase this number from 5 to 6, you need 100 times more computers. If you want to increase it from 5 to 7, you need 10,000 more computers. So that's not working. It's not a practical solution. So you need to think different. And thinking different means, in our case, using tricks, using the best platforms for a very specific job, and perform data analysis to increase your cracking efficiency over time. This is an example of a trick. This is a trick on the data from Ashley Madison. It's a US-based dating company that was breached a number of years ago. And they upgraded from MD5 to bcrypt with the work factor 12. So that's from extremely fast for an attacker to extremely slow. What you can do, if you're lucky, the application code is also leaked. That was the case here. And the database still uses some algorithms based on MD5. So for upgrade paths and also for reset procedures. If you lost your password, that was not a bcrypt password, or at least not the token that was used. But it was still MD5 based. So what you can do is you crack the legacy fast hashes first with 8-character brute force, for example. And you use the results as a dictionary to crack the slow results. And that's, of course, a dictionary with a very high hit rate near 100%. What's the result? Great success. The attack speeds up with about 100 million times. So that's testing 100 passwords in months. That was the case if you didn't use this trick. If you're using this trick, you can try to crack, you can try to brute force passwords up to 8 or 9 characters. So buying hardware doesn't work. Using smart tricks does. Then you should choose the best cracking platform. Typically that's a GPU. But if you got a huge data set, or if you're using very complex rules, GPUs haven't got enough memory. So the attacks cannot run in a single run. It takes way more time. And in that case, it might be beneficial to use a CPU. If this is the case, you can simply calculate this in your spreadsheet program. But if this is the case, use high core count CPUs with AVX12, extend vector extensions, and you're pretty good. If you got hashes with hardware-specific slowdowns, use FPGAs. But there's an issue. You cannot buy them. There are no off-the-shelf FPGA crackers, and the amount of hardware models that support it is very limited. But it is the fastest way. You get more speed for less power, which is good. So that's what we did. This is one example. This is the actual advertisement picture from eBay, from the first batch we bought. So I don't know why he's got a hat and sunglasses, and but that's the way the guy used the devices for Bitcoin mining, because they were very popular for Bitcoin mining at the time. And what we do, we build them in rack mount services with proper cooling, proper power supplies, etc., so they can run 24/7 at max speed to crack a lot of unique content. So what are the results and observations? We covered over 7 billion email and password pairs. So in my opinion, that's quite a lot. Typically, we see 1 or 2 million new passwords a day come in. There's a lot of fake password news out there and disinformation. Got some examples later. And within a typical organization, if you got more than, let's say, 1,000 accounts, you're in. And so if you're the attacker, I'm a pen tester, professional pen tester as well. If you got more than 1,000 accounts, there's always at least one person that's reusing passwords and allows you to get in and get some foothold and getting the party started. At scale, I mean millions of accounts. For example, clients with millions of customer accounts. We can typically breach about in between 5 and 15% of the accounts that are enrolled. So again, it's up to you, but in my opinion, that's quite a lot. Very interesting. Typically, a typical company doesn't have effective protection against credential stuffing at all. Then all passwords matter. So I guess most people are familiar with the LinkedIn breach from 2012. Typically, people say, but it's very old, it's not relevant anymore, and old data, old passwords. True, but we still recover new passwords in 2024 from the LinkedIn breach. Not a lot, but still tens of thousands each month. And typically, those are not the password ones and the welcome ones, but those are the really complex passwords. And the complexer the password is, the higher the chance that it's still used by people nowadays, still in 2024. More examples included later as well. Then the grass is greener on the other side. So if you got even basic measures in place, that will help. So cyber criminals, they typically perform some test runs. And if it doesn't look that good, if they cannot breach any account, well, they go to your competitor and try to credential stuff your competitor. Well, that's good. Mission accomplished. So even basic measures will help you. An interesting one, we saw at the pen test at the client, a good password policy can actually work counterproductive. So this client used 12 length password policy with all kinds of fancy things you don't see at most organizations. Credential stuffing was successful and the client was surprised. So they asked us, hey, can you show what data did you use and why did it work? Because we got a really good password policy. Well, in the end, it's very simple. The number of candidates that were leaked goes down because you already know for sure that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 will not work. It's not long enough. So the number goes down, but the quality of the candidates that are remaining goes drastically up. So you end up with a more efficient and more stealthier attack. So this is a bit counterintuitive, but this is the way it seems to work in real life. Well, some fake news. Who's a hookers.nl user? We see one. If you're not familiar, for all other folks that are not familiar with hookers.nl, it's a website where you can review sex workers. So if you're a regular customer, then you can say, hey, well, this lady or this guy is really good, or don't go there. They got hacked, and a lot of people were worried. So there was a statement from the operators from the website, and they said, well, no passwords stolen. There were no passwords stolen, so nothing's going on. We already had the data from quite some time. So we saw that it was not true, and we were actually doing some burn-in tests for some new hardware, and in a long weekend we cracked 57% of the passwords. So I think it's good not to trust a victim. Typically, victims might have a different agenda, which is the case in many documented cases we've seen before. Then typically there's no basic protection. So if you're hacked because of missing basic cyber hygiene, you can just say, well, it was a very sophisticated attack. We've never seen this before. Or it was a state-sponsored threat actor. Typically no critical questions are answered or are asked, and not even by the media. And typically it's not true. So in reality, if you got a school kid with €5 or $5, they can buy billions of accounts on the fora, or they can get it for free on the Telegram channels. And if they got a gaming PC, they can launch a successful attack. So if you're familiar with PC gaming, and you know Call of Duty, for example, and the rule of thumb is if you can run Call of Duty, you can brute force an 8-position hash within a day. So that's the amount of computing power that's available to school kids nowadays. And what we see at incident response sometimes at clients is that sometimes the guys get caught, and they are actually teenagers doing this. After the Snowflake breach that affected the Taylor Swift tickets, we looked up our data on Snowflake. This is part of it. And you need to trust me if I tell you that redacting the data took more time than looking the data up. It's a lot. So this is the dashboard for Snowflake users. So these are actual enrolled production environments that are used by Snowflake users. Within the second column, the username, and the third column, their passwords. I'm always surprised, so I got a little quiz question. I'm always surprised by the eagle-eye view of some of the attendees. What do you see? Do you see something out of the ordinary in the password column? Sorry? Yeah, but that's not what I'm looking for. Give it a little. Very good. So one of the passwords, and this was actually internal Snowflake account, so this was operated by Snowflake themselves, Snowflake 23, exclamation mark. So not even the basic password controls were in place at the time at that company. And this was data we had 6 or 9 months before the actual breach. Then the last item, all passwords matter. We were contacted by a tech journalist. He wrote a book about passwords, and he was promoting his book at Eva Jinek's talk show. And he contacted us. He said, "Hey, can you crack some passwords from Eva? That would be fun." Sure. So that's what we did. So we cracked 2012 Dropbox password. So again, very old password, same age as the LinkedIn breach. And it was still used by Eva for all her passwords for all important services. So it was a live show, and actually the journalist had to help her change all the passwords before going live, because they were afraid that otherwise things went wrong. So probably you guys, you change your password, you got quality passwords, etc. But most normal people, they reuse passwords. That's the way it works in real life. Old passwords can also help you to follow a person over time. Because historical passwords can help you to unravel the mechanism that a lot of people are using for creating passwords. So if you got 10, and they use some kind of a mechanism that you can understand, then probably you can guess number 11 and number 12. So that's a very useful resource for guessing future passwords. The other thing is that you can find personal accounts based on professional accounts and the other way around. So if the password is quite unique, that allows you to search on a password and find other email addresses. Well, it's always fun to do that with politicians, or at least that's what I think. Most politicians use really crappy passwords, like most other people. But some of them use high-quality passwords, that high quality that they're unique worldwide. So we only see that password 10 times in 7 billion passwords that we've breached. Using this, you can identify their personal accounts. So let's say this is John Doe at this official government agency. You also find John D at Gmail, J Doe at Hotmail, and some burner addresses. The interesting thing is you can use those addresses again to look if they were used in other data breaches and see what the folks were doing in their with their personal accounts. Well, one of them was a member of the House of Parliament, or an ex-member of the House of Parliament. And another quiz question, what did we find? Really close, really close. Which obviously makes it possible for damaging the reputation, that's one, but might also be used, for example, for blackmailing. So it's very easy to make a mistake. The internet will never forget, and if you get more and more data and more computing power, it's really difficult to stay on the radar. That's it for now. I don't know if we've got time for questions, but for sure you can check if your accounts were breached at our website. We got free community accounts. And if you got questions later on, please find me somewhere at OrangeCon. Or have we got time for one question? I don't know.
Yeah, I think we have time for one question. Yes.
Yeah.
What are the legal implications of keeping the found password data online or and doing the hashing stuffs?
Well, I'm not a legal guy, but obviously we consulted some pro legal guys, and they tell us that it shouldn't be a problem because there are some exceptions in GDPR. And one of the exceptions is protecting your, I don't know what the exact words are, but protecting computer networks and automated systems. That's one. The other thing, if you look at the cybercrime laws, they say it's an issue if you publish non-public data, but this, it's debatable, but this is my statement. This is public data.
Well, and with that, I would like to ask you all for a huge round of applause for Jeroen van Beek.